If you read on the screen here, it talks about throughout the whole Old Testament how the term proselyte never comes about because they're going under the same requirements that it takes to be an Israelite. Basically, people converted to Judaism. I'll get into that a little later, but just know that people converted to Judaism through circumcision and a vow to the covenant. This was the Abrahamic covenant. You know, you basically had to circumcise yourself. Moses almost, was basically getting chased by God, and he had, God basically tried to kill him. But then Zipporah took, a smooth stone and circumcised their son, and God stopped the pursuit. I go over that in my covenant series. You can read that story in Exodus. But that's how serious circumcision was. Circumcision and a vow to the covenant made you an Israelite. And the reason why they have the term proselyte here for the New Testament is basically because of a lot of unfortunate events that Jews had with Gentiles. And we'll be going into that a little later. Just to let you know, there were two kinds of proselytes according to the Bible. The distinction was between proselytes of the gate, which is mentioned in Exodus, and proselytes of righteousness. You're going to see later on that people who were not full 100% proselytes were called by a series of a whole bunch of other names that the New Testament writers speak of. If you don't know this, it'll go straight over your head. But once you do know this, it calls Cornelius into question, Titus into question, Philemon into question, a lot of people. So anyway, it says here that the proselytes at the gate were half proselytes because, they weren't required to be circumcised, nor comply to the Mosaic law. They were bound only to conform to the so-called 7 precepts of Noah. They would abstain from idolatry, blasphemy, bloodshed, uncleanliness. You basically can read it on the screen. They had to abstain from work on the Sabbath. Now, the proselytes of righteousness, religious, devout proselytes, that's what they called them in Acts chapter 13, were bound to all the doctrines and precepts of the Jewish economy and were members of the synagogue in full communion. They were called proselytes. Like I said, you're probably wondering, well, if they're calling them proselytes in the New Testament and they're doing the same thing in the Old Testament, why don't they call them proselytes in the Old Testament? That's a good question. Let's find out. It basically says Gentiles are far less sharply differentiated from the Israelites in the Old Testament than in the New Testament times, and there's a reason for that. It says under the Old Testament, regulations, they were basically non-Israelites, but they were not hated or despised for that reason, and they were treated almost on a plane of equality, except certain tribes in Canaan in regard to whom there were special regulations of non-intercourse. Gentile strangers enjoyed the hospitality of the Israelite who was commanded to love him. In that verse, to sympathize with him, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You read that in Exodus. Kenites were treated almost as brethren, especially the children of Rechab. You can read that in Judges. Uriah the Hittite was a trusted warrior of David in 2 Samuel. And also Ittai the Gittite was a captain of David's guard in 2 Samuel. A name I can't pronounce, the Jebusite, was a respected resident of Jerusalem. Gentiles had the right of an asylum in the cities of refuge. Some could inherit even as late as the exile. There were Gentile servants who were not to be defrauded of his wage. You could basically read on the screen here. These are the laws that they were instructed to, as to how to treat the Gentiles around them. As a matter of fact, I actually outlined here the laws that were for the Jews and the Gentiles. There was one law for 2 different types of people. Yeah, that's right. A Jew and a Gentile under the same law. One law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger. It says, one is about the Sabbath, 7 days, there will be no unleavened bread and all that. And it says there, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. And it says it again, and when a stranger shall sojourn with you, let all his males be circumcised. In other words, let him become an Israelite. Yes, circumcision does make you an Israelite. Circumcision and a vow to God's covenant. Then after that it says, and then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as one born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. Here's another one, and thou shalt not vex a stranger, nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Matter of fact, it says it again in the next chapter, and thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger. God even wanted strangers to keep the Sabbath. So once again, there it is in Exodus once again. In another chapter, it says, don't let the stranger work. The stranger within thy gates cannot work. It says it again in another chapter here, chapter 23. 6 days shall you do work, but on the seventh day you have to rest. And the stranger, may he be refreshed. Or, may be refreshed. In Leviticus, it says, there shall be a statute for you, on the seventh day of the seventh month, that you shall afflict your souls and do no work at all. Whether you be one of your own country or a stranger that is born among you. Matter of fact, here's some more. These are all the laws in Leviticus. You shall have one manner of law as well for the stranger, as for one of your own country. For I am the Lord your God. And if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. And thou shalt love him as thyself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I'm not even going to read the rest of this, because obviously you see it on the screen for yourself. I'm presenting these facts because this is the posture, this is the position that the Israelites had, or were told to have by God, toward the Gentiles, the strangers.